Morning, everyone. Happy Mondays and welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I am joined by my fellow Mirror columnist and sports writer, Darren Lewis. Morning, Darren.
Morning. How are you?
This is People's Paper Review. And normally we would ask you for lots of comments as we're going through this to help take part in what we're discussing. But one of the things we're going to be talking about this morning is the murder of Sir David Amess. And this is an active murder investigation. Contrary to what you might read elsewhere, it has not been solved. We do not know the cause. We do not know the reasons. Under the Contempt of Court Act, it is an offence to publish things which might influence a jury. So any comments that are about this murder will not be posted on this screen. Please pay tribute to the man. Please discuss his record as an MP, the loss of a loved one. Give us your thoughts. We're happy to post those comments. But there will be no comments at all on my broadcast about this murder. We're also going to be discussing Carrie Simmons, the breaking of lockdown, and trophy hunting later on. So please do give us your thoughts on that. We do want to hear them. We do want you to be part of this. We also need to comply with the Contempt of Court Act. And it's just an act of basic decency as well. We don't know what happened quite yet, so let's just wait and see until we do. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the fallout from the murder of Tory MP Sir David Amess last Friday and the statement by his wife and 5 children overnight calling for togetherness and thanking all those who paid tribute to him as something that's helped them through what must have been a horrific weekend for them. Today, Parliament's going to be holding its own tribute with church services and MPs speaking in the House of Commons about the loss of someone who seems to have been a fine friend to most of them. But it is a sad fact that every tragedy in history has been used as a stick to beat someone with. And that has begun already, with talk of protecting MPs by keeping them as far away from the public as possible. Police guards at constituency surgeries, airport-style security checks, and other expensive things that are more likely to divide people rather than bring people together. Now, Darren, just as a quick question, how would you feel if, for example, you wanted to speak to your MP about a police injustice, which many, many constituents do and have done, and there was a copper on the door on your way in?
That's a very good question. I'll start, though, I'm sure you won't mind if I do, Susie, by paying tribute to Sir David Amess, because the statement put out by his family, it kind of summed up the kind of man and the kind of family that they are. Nobody should die in this way, they said, and they described him as a wonderful and inspiring man. And the avalanche of tributes that we've seen to him since Friday lunchtime spoke volumes from all sides, it has to be said, spoke volumes about the kind of man that he was and just how highly he was regarded as a man who'd been in politics since 1983 and had touched the lives of many, many people. So I think that's probably the best place for me to start. In answer to your question, though, I think it would be a problem. It would be an issue. And I think after what happened with Joe Cox, a lot of MPs changed the way they operated anyway. They decided not to advertise their surgeries and instead to have a situation where they took bookings instead. They decided that when they were going to go to events, they wouldn't splash them across social media as they previously would have done. They would simply go and then talk in retrospect about what had happened. And I think that's a more sensible way to go. I think when you start posting police officers in certain places, I don't know. I don't think it will encourage ordinary members of the public to come and speak to go to surgeries. I think it possibly would dissuade them. And
yeah, it's the general attitude that, you know, a police officer makes everyone feel safe. Not all the time, and not everybody. And a lot of the people that are speaking to MPs are people who don't feel safe on a daily basis for some reason, and are therefore going to feel more under threat from perhaps seeing police officers around. It's like saying we must put more police officers in the streets after the murder of Sarah Everard. Literally, a policeman on the streets was the problem. And although it's entirely reasonable perhaps for MPs to have more checks and people coming to see them, Jo Cox wasn't murdered by someone who had an appointment with her. She was murdered on her way into the constituency surgery by someone who was outside. And, you know, that hasn't been solved. That issue hasn't been fixed, because giving someone more appointments doesn't stop what happened to Jo Cox happening again, unfortunately. But what does tend to happen with these things, I've always noticed over a long time in journalism, Darren, I don't know if you have as well, but the measures that are needed tend to get ignored. The ones that are introduced are far too heavy-handed and usually take things the wrong way. And then also they use it as a way to hang a hook, to hang loads of other stuff on, which the government was trying to do and failing with until this point. And now they're using this as a really good opportunity to get something else through. And here on page 4, down at the bottom, what's known as the page 4 hamper, which is there's a little story down towards the bottom of the page, little box like this. If we can bring up page 4 and 5, you'll see it. She says she wants to tackle online abuse. And she says she's going to look at removing, there it is, a little grey box down the bottom. That's the hamper, everybody. She's going to look at the right to removing the right to anonymity on social media sites. Now, Darren, she's saying here that Facebook and Twitter, they've had these problems, but the government's been trying to get this stuff through, controlling those sites for years, and has failed for a number of reasons. Darren, you and I both get plenty of trolls. I don't know about you, but I've certainly had my share of death threats, both in person and online. And I don't know how you feel about them, but I tend to feel that the vast majority are blowing off steam. And although it's not nice, I'm far rather they type it down in a way that can be stored and later traced than just shouting abuse in the street or something. I don't think that your average death threat on social media is a reason to worry usually. What about you?
Yeah, I think, listen, for me, I know that we are pumping content from this very broadcast out on social media at the moment, and my filters, I use filters on social media, so often I don't see a lot of the abusive content that might well be directed at me. The trouble is that when you're an MP, you want to get you want to make contact with everybody. You want to be available to everybody. Your job is to be available to everybody, so it's difficult. And then it becomes about how you treat the discourse that comes your way. And 2 years ago, we saw Paula Sheriff very, very concerned about that some of the abuse that she had been having. And we know that she had reported it. We know that some people had taken it further. And I'm like you, I would prefer somebody to be typing it down rather than obviously it being in my face. But there are a number of female MPs that get that kind of thing, post it sometimes on social media just to make people aware of the kind of thing that they are receiving. And I think the issue that you raise just shows how difficult this entire issue is, because it's not as simple as pointing in one direction. There are lots of different strands to this. It will not be solved by tackling online abuse. There's no evidence to suggest anything. There's no evidence to suggest that any one measure will succeed in dealing with the problem in its entirety. And I think what we need to do is look at a number of things. But the trouble is, Susie, that we had all of this after Joe Cox. We had all of this after Stephen Timms. You know, we have this kind of hand-wringing and basically searching for an answer after every tragedy. And we promise publicly to ourselves as politicians, as media people, as ordinary people using social media, that we will try to make things better. And the trouble is that we get complacent and the will to do it drops away. I saw one MP over the weekend saying that lots of measures were brought in after Joe Cox, but then, to quote him, everyone just sort of forgot about it. And that's a problem. We saw Tulip Sadiq this morning on Breakfast TV talking about the fact that she had been very rigorous about protecting her safety after her friend Joe was murdered. But then in the last couple of years, in her words, again, she became a bit blasé. And that's what happens. That's why these things tend to come up again. If you're going to implement something, you've got to do it rigorously. We tend not to do that. We tend to be very reactionary as a society. I'm trying to be very careful about where I'm directing my comments, but I think as a society in general, we tend to get very reactionary, and then eventually, in the words of that MP, we tend to forget about it.
Yeah, there's a moment of moral panic where you go, something wrong's happened. Ugh! And it kind of goes too far the wrong way. Now, we have to sort of see how things pan out. Obviously, today is not the day that they're going to be starting to push new laws through, but I would bet my bottom dollar that something draconian that wouldn't otherwise get on the statute book is going to be suggested in the next few weeks and months. So we'll keep an eye on that. Now, on page 6 and 7, there is another spread about the suspect in this murder, and he appears to have been a loner and obviously was dangerous. But what we're talking about here in this piece, which has been double checked by the lawyer for contempt of court, don't worry people, is that there are police officers warning that as a result of lockdown, many people are being radicalized in their bedrooms. And that has always been an issue for the security services. They always find it difficult to track down that kind of terrorist, or any kind of criminal at all who's doing stuff in their bedrooms. But what they're calling these here is the bedroom radicals. And lockdown has given rise to people who are being radicalized or made worse somehow alone and at home. Now, there are various ways around that issue. There's mental health services and there's the Prevent anti-terror program, which doesn't always appear to be working terribly well, either of them, it's got to be said. We'll find out in the course of the court case that will come out of this exactly what, if any, influence they had. But Darren, how can I put this? Do you think that this is kind of goes to what you were talking about here, about how the issues around Joe Cox were never really resolved? The man who killed her was known to be causing problems locally for quite a while. He was buying terrorist literature. He was arguably a far-right neo-Nazi terrorist, as well as being quite an unwell man. And if those things haven't been fixed, we're going to get similar crimes to Joe Cox's murder again, aren't we? This isn't going to be the last one.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the concept that the lockdown produces bedroom terrorists or bedroom radicalization. We have, as a newspaper, been campaigning for a long time about the ills of social media. Lots of other publications have, to be fair. And lots of families have. We've seen lots of cases, lots of situations where people have screamed from the rooftops about something to be done about the impact of the internet. And what we've seen is individuals move from government into that kind of industry and not really address the issues that they're well aware of, but when they have different paymasters, they choose not to see some of what we are talking about until issues like this come up. And I think that the internet has been radicalizing terrorists for a couple of decades now. I don't think that you can look at this particular situation and say that it is to blame for what has happened. And as I said before, I want to be very careful about any kind of finger pointing. I don't want to do that. I don't think now is the time really to be doing that when, you know, we are still reflecting on the passing of a good man. I think what we need to do is look at it in its entirety at all of the climate that we have created in order to deal with the problem properly. I'm a cynic in terms of this prevent program. You know, if someone has the will to cause harm, is a program really going to stop them? Are we that convinced by it? I'm not necessarily. But certainly I think that the problem around radicalizing people who wish ill on other people is it will always be an ongoing one. And I think that there are a number of reasons for that take deeper investigation and for us to kind of look at in a deeper way.
Yeah. Now, part of the reason why, the social media sites are not really able to be controlled by the government is that they argue that they are merely like the lamppost on which other people publish something. They're not the publisher themselves. And so therefore they can't be sued. They are the medium as opposed to, an active participant in things. But they are having to take more of an active role and moderating things and cleaning up content. So it's entirely possible that they will lose that argument at some point. But they are extremely powerful. And that's why governments haven't been able to do anything, and they will use any opportunity they can perhaps to try to do something. So we shall see, won't we? Now, to other news.
What do you just very quickly, Susan, what do you think about that? Because I think, I am of the opinion that if you look at somebody like Nick Clegg, who's gone from government into that industry, and is well aware and has been, it's been put to him for over a long period of time, the dangers. Ordinary people have talked about the impact that social media has had on their families. Ordinary families have suffered loss. Ordinary families have had children, sons, daughters radicalized by the internet, and don't seem to have had the kind of understanding that they would have been looking for from people like him. So what's your view on it?
I think the fact that Nick Clegg is a bit of a hypocrite isn't news. And he certainly had his share of death threats as an MP and as a member of the coalition. But I think really trying to move away from the argument of whether Facebook is a publisher, for example, what you've got to do is look at the algorithms. Those who are watching this right now, if you have seen a Mirror video and interacted with it in the comments, then you will see in your Facebook feed at the top of the feed suggestions for other videos. Right? If you've got Disney or Netflix at home, if you've watched a cowboy film one night, you'll get a suggestion the next night to watch another cowboy film. Right? The algorithms everywhere that run our lives. And that is now when you interact with the government as well. It's when you interact with the Mirror website. It's everywhere. They will offer you more of the same over and over and over and over again. Now, when it comes to streaming services, you want to listen to something different tomorrow night on Spotify or something different on Netflix you want to watch. So, I've watched a cowboy film one night. I want to watch a Julia Roberts movie the next night. I want to watch, well, I don't really, but, I want to watch something different. And I think it should be the same with the algorithms that we see in Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all the other things. The stuff that is suggested. If you are a young teenage girl and you look at one thing about, anorexia on Instagram, you get offered more and more and more and more. The same as if you're looking at online pornography, you're offered more and more and more, and it takes you down a rabbit hole. It doesn't matter where you are, you go down a rabbit hole. And I think those algorithms are the things that need changing. And that's where I think governments can legislate and force the providers to offer a variety of content, not matched content, if you see what I mean. And
just one other thing, Sue. Just to add to that, I mean, and as well as government putting pressure on internet companies, they themselves need to have a look at themselves, because what we're hearing is that ministers have failed to act on the recommendations for tackling the rise of extremism in this country. And there's been a report by the Commission for Tackling Extremism, and they've been warning since 2019 that more had to be done to deal with the evolving threats involving closing legal loopholes, to allow people who inspire terrorism to go free. And surprise, surprise, they haven't formally responded, according to the Independent today on their splash, to any of the reports released by the Commission since 2019. And that points to the complacency I was talking about earlier in this broadcast. We do get very angry early on, and we do get very vociferous in calling for the kind of things that will protect MPs, protect governmental staff, protect us. But then what happens is that after the initial reactionism, we tend to get complacent as a society. And
it's easier to shout than it is to do. That's the fundamental problem. And we all get that. And that's probably why there's trolling as well. And people who want to send you or I complaints or death threats or anything else. It's because it's easier for them to do that than it is to, that's why I'm not too bothered about it, than it is for them to hunt us down and cause us problems. So, we'll have to move on, I think. Thank you, everyone, for watching so far. Now, there is other news. I'm afraid it's the sort of thing which does make people a bit angry with politicians, which is a bending or breaking of the rules that they set for others. Allegations have been made that while London was in Tier 4 lockdown last Christmas, the Prime Minister and his wife, Carrie, had a friend over to stay. Now, this happened at a time when Christmas was cancelled for many of us, all of us, in fact. People handed over presents in motorway service stations. They stood in freezing wet gardens to give imaginary hugs to family they hadn't seen for months, not seeing each other. Now, the Prime Minister's spokesman says that no rules were broken, but that isn't the same as denying that it happened. Now, Darren, I've looked, and the only reasons to breach Tier 4 lockdown rules were for childcare, exercise, travel for work and education, shopping, medicine, caring for someone, or being in a support bubble. Residents are not supposed to stay overnight away from their homes. So it sounds like either Nimco Ali, who is godmother to their son, was either, if they're saying it was within the rules, whatever happened, if this did happen, they're either claiming that she was needed for childcare, despite the fact 2 parents were present, or they formed a support bubble that lasted a matter of hours, perhaps. But how many people, Darren, do you think did that? We can get angry about this and go, they're breaking the rules. And a lot of people didn't. But how many people formed a support bubble for 3 or 4 days?
The problem is, though, that they're not the people who make the rules. They're not the people who enforce the rules. And listen, I'll be frank, I'm speaking as somebody well aware that if you're black, you're several times more likely to be fined, penalized, punished for breaking the rules than if you're white. So, this matters. This matters to a lot of people around this country who made sacrifices last Christmas and didn't go and see family that they would have wanted to see. Some of them, some people were confused by the rules. Some people were frustrated by the rules. But the fact is they followed them. And look, this is another terrific story, by the way, I've got to say, by our politics team, Bain Glaze. I think it's another example, Susie, of one rule for us and another rule for them. Whichever way we strip it down, I think that what we've had, and you pointed it out yourself, we've had the spokesman for number 10 and for Carrie denying that COVID rules had been broken, but specifically not denying that she hadn't joined them for Christmas. And there's the rub, because if she hadn't, why not just say so? If there wasn't a case to answer, why not just say so? Now, what we also know is that there are going to be questions for the spokeswoman over the next day or so. So we will know more very soon. But again, we have seen already that there is a situation where rules are made for us and we have to follow them. And then the people in power, the people who make those rules, go and do something completely different. And so you can understand why a lot of people are frustrated. You can understand why a lot of people, some of whom, because of the devastation wreaked throughout the country over the past couple of years, have suffered bereavements and have wanted to maybe seek solace in the bosom of their family and have not been able to. And then you have this.
Exactly. Now, Mike says, morning, Mike, Boris Johnson thinking the rules don't apply to him is nothing new. It's not surprising. It's probably not enough to knock his popularity ratings, although he is at a personal approval rating of minus 18% at the moment, which is his lowest ever. But what do you think about Carrie and Boris having their friend round for Christmas? Did you have a support bubble over Christmas? Is it a support bubble you had just for Christmas, or did you have it for longer than that? I was in a support bubble as a single parent with my parents, but we've been in a support bubble for the entire length of the pandemic. So we didn't do it especially for Christmas, but it did mean that I did get a bit of a Christmas with my folks. I don't know about Nimka Ali's family setup, but maybe she didn't have anyone else to spend time with. She's a single person. She would be able to form a support bubble. But I'd like you say, Darren, it's how it looks, isn't it? And when you go into Downing Street, you have to sign in, and the security have to clear you and stuff like that. So there is no way it would be deniable ever. If she has been in there, you have to say she's been in there. And it was always going to look bad, even if it was within the rules, even if it was reasonable. It was always going to look bad for the rest of the country who've just been told with a few days warning by the Prime Minister that Christmas is off.
No way
for it ever to look good. Why did they do it? She's a PR expert. She's a PR professional. What is she thinking?
That's such a good point. And as I say, listen, we don't know what may come out. There may be something that comes out down the line that does exonerate them. So we'll wait for that. But the problem for Boris Johnson is his form. He lies. The problem with this government is that they lie. There is a list, as long as your arm, of things that they have lied about. Dominic Cummings, who, is former chief of staff, he's turned supergrass to tell us all about the things that the government has lied about. So this is difficult for him because of his past form. But as I say, it may well be that there is something that comes out that exonerates them. But as you say, everything has to be formalized. So, and that could well be the reason why the spokeswoman, while she's insisted that the COVID rules haven't been broken, she hasn't been as specific as to say that Ms. Ali wasn't in attendance. We'll wait to hear what maybe Ms. Ali or the spokeswoman has in order to maybe give us some meat on the bones as far as this is concerned, but it doesn't look good at all.
No, there's some tap dancing going on, which is always interesting when you watch someone who's in public relations doing that. But what can you say? Apart from, it's worth pointing out, Sir David Amess, in one of his last interviews, which was with Ian Dale on his podcast, it's worth checking it out and listening to it if you want to. It's on the LBC app. Was talking about the one thing that he really dislikes. He was one of those things called a career politician, which lots of people criticize, but he'd been involved in politics since a teenager. He'd come up through the party, organising fetes and raffles and goodness knows what else to fundraise and pamphlet and things like that. And then was in Parliament for such a long time as a public servant. And he said one of the things that he really disliked was when someone, big business or whoever else, woke up one morning and he said, decided to grace the Tory party with their presence and said, I'm going to run for office and blah, 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 and maybe end up as Prime Minister, who knows? And he really resented that because he said that is someone who doesn't have the spirit of public service and who's doing everyone else a disservice by what they think is, gracing them with their presence. So I wonder what he would have to say about this if he were still with us. We'll never know, of course. Now, it's all been a fairly grim old morning so far. Do let us know what you think about Carrie and Boris's Christmas with their friend, if it happened, whether it broke lockdown rules or not. Did you have to stay away from your family last Christmas? What did you do to exchange presents? Did you form a support bubble with someone? Let us know. Those are comments we do want to hear about today. Now, there is a little bit of slightly good news, although it's it's not really exciting, but it's quite good news. So here it is. Now, surveys show that most people are pro-lion in this country and anti-hunting. The proportion may be slightly different in the US, where the Mirror has tracked down a chap called Philip Smith. There he is in the blue shirt being confronted. He is a bloodthirsty physiotherapist, as the copy will tell you, which is a fantastic way of describing somebody, if you ask me, who shot and killed Mopani the lion in Zimbabwe earlier this summer after paying £30,000 for the privilege. Now, Smith shot him with a bow and arrow. If you're going to shoot someone, at least do it in the most efficient way possible, you twit. And sorry, that's probably a terrible thing to say in the current circumstances. He shot him with a bow and arrow, but left him alive and mortally wounded for 24 hours before coming back and posing with a picture with the carcass over there on the right-hand side. And what's really good about this, what caught my eye this morning, Darren, is that this man who paid someone to bait a lion, to draw it out of its safe haven, out of its reserve, killed it and then left it to die in agony, said, when confronted, "How did you find me?" Said the hunter. What do you think the lion would have said? And Darren, doesn't this prove that the bad guy always gets caught in the end?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does, and I'm so glad that our man Chris Buckton, who's very good at this kind of thing, has managed to put this guy in some way in the place of the animals that he's been hunting for so long. I mean, it just beggars belief that you would pay that amount of money for the privilege, and I underline the word privilege to and not in a positive way, trust me, to just basically kill animals. This guy, I mean, I don't have the words to describe, well, I do, but probably not for this broadcast, to describe the mind of somebody who would want to do that. And I think it's the circumstances of the killing as well that are so horrendous, not just shooting him, but leaving him in agony for hours and hours and hours. I mean, it just beggars belief. And so to find this guy, to nail him, to put him in a difficult position, to make people aware of who he is, absolutely right. Got to be done.
Yes. Thank you, Chris. The only teetotal journalist in Fleet Street, as far as I know.
Actually,
there's two. Okay, there's two. It's 50% of the teetotal journalists in Fleet Street. Thank you for joining, Darren. Thank you for watching, everybody. Sorry we couldn't get to any of your comments, but you weren't obeying the Contempt of Court Act 1981. Go and look it up. And bear in mind that when we are on social media, we are all publishers now, right? Facebook denies responsibility, which means it's on you to say what's within the law and what is not within the law. And if you break the law, you can be prosecuted and you can be traced by the Attorney General in some circumstances and made to answer for your crimes. So be careful. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Darren, for coming along. And we will see you again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda, hopefully one with some slightly better news in it. Bye-bye.